In 1937, four men crossed beyond K2 into the unmapped Shaksgam, where rivers rose without warning, food ran thin, and the earth itself told stories older than life. Between ice and stone, they raced time to rewrite the map of Asia.
It's 2:20 a.m. I'm still buried in the Himalayan Club journals, century-old field notes from the Himalayas. It's like diving deep into the documented history of the Himalayas from the early 1900s. The journals cover everything, from indigenous wisdom, cultural myths, to epic expeditions and groundbreaking discoveries. These forgotten stories are brought to life by synthetic voices in the Himalayan Journals podcast. Subscribe, zone out, binge, and pass it to a fellow mountain junkie.
In 1937, a small party went north of the Karakoram watershed to look at rocks, glaciers, and the shape of a remote country. The plan was simple in outline and tight in time. Rivers rose each afternoon, and by July they would be in flood. The work had to be done before the Shaksgam cut off the way back. J.B. Auden traveled with E. Shipton, the leader, H.W. Tilman, and M.A. Spender. Porters were kept to a minimum. Spender carried the main survey from stations based on K2, 28,250 feet, while Shipton and Auden used a light 3-inch theodolite with a Leica attachment to fill in ground that Spender could not reach, including the K2 Glacier, the lower Shaksgam Valley, and the Nobande-Sobande Glacier. Apart from Professor Desio's reconnaissance of the Panma and Sarpo Laggo and a part of the Shaksgam, there were few topographical facts to lean on. Geological sketch plans were made day by day to be set later on Spender's map. Floodwater set the pace. On 28th June, after crossing the Aghil Col, Auden, Lakpa, and Mahadi reached the Shaksgam and were dismayed by its breadth. There was a real fear that food would give out and that all would have to turn north again over the Aghil Pass. A spell of cloud and snow in early July eased the melt and lowered the river, and that change allowed the party to get back to the Indian side on time. The work drew on older observations and corrected some of them. South of the watershed, Godwin, Austin, Lydekker, Donnelly, and Desio had left notes. North of it, only Desio had worked. Lydekker's older gneiss up the Biafo proved to be intrusive granite of tertiary age, not the oldest rock. The marbles he called Triassic were not set in a syncline up the Biafo, but lay interbedded with biotite schists in an anticlinal structure. Hayden's Pamir limestone and the Saracol shales had signaled a belt of Mesozoic rocks towards the Raskam. Desio in 1929 had found fossiliferous Permo-Carboniferous beds on the lower Sarpo Laggo and Shaksgam and sketched the geology of the Panma, Baltoro, and Sarpo Laggo basins. The 1937 traverse set out the sequence more clearly. 3 main series were established in descending order: the Aghil series, Triassic and Jurassic; the Shaksgam series, Permo-Carboniferous; and the Sarpo Laggo series, probably lower Paleozoic and older. Jurassic fossils were collected for the first time. More Permo-Carboniferous material was obtained to supplement Desio's finds. These collections went to Dr. M. R. Sani for study. Across about 200 miles north of the watershed, from the Pamirs to the Rimo Glacier, fossiliferous Tethys sediments appeared not as a single outcrop, but as basins, likely an echelon set between older, unfossiliferous rocks. One such Mesozoic basin in the Aghil Range west of the pass stretched about 16 miles. Intrusions and structures were mapped where they could be seen. Post-Carboniferous granodiorites, sometimes gneisos, cut both the Shaksgam and Sarpo Laggo rocks, and later a network of Lamprophere dikes, post-Triassic in age, sliced through them. Dolerites occurred in the Aghil. Local recumbent folds were noted north of Karakoram and southeast of the Aghil Pass. One long contact crossing the Aghil suggested faulting, and east of the Nala, from the pass towards the Shaksgam, the granite even appeared to be overthrust on the Shaksgam shales. Near the junction of Sarpo Laggo and Shaksgam, unaltered dark limestones and shales of Permo-Trias lay beside intrusive granite that held tall wedges of partially altered limestones and slates. Along the K, to Glacier and westward, these dark limestones bleached into white marmors. South across the watershed, the same palitic rocks shifted into biotite granulites and schists, and near Korophon carried minerals such as epidote, actinolite, diopside, garnet, chloritoid, staurolite, and dalusite, and kyanite. Some of these highly altered rocks were judged to be permocarboniferous. Farther north, the dark Sarpo Laggo group kept a lower grade, mostly phyllites with incipient biotite. Clues to changing environments were plain. Coarse conglomerates and breccias in the Shaksgam series pointed to a shift in conditions. Carbonized wood was found in limestone near the Aghil Pass. Red continental beds crossed the Surakwat and ran east along the south bank of the Shaksgam. These tied towards Daytera's Tisnab series and likely matched the Nagthat of Garhwal and the Tanol of Kashmir. The record suggested a southward swell of the northern landmass in Gondwana time, before the Tethys spread at the end of the Carboniferous, and a later return to continental facies near Yarkand in late Permian or early Triassic time. The granites of the Karakoram resembled those of the Indus and Deosai, rich in sodic plagioclase, hornblende, and basic xenoliths. Their age, set against Drasburzil volcanic xenoliths, pointed to a tertiary intrusion, a question to be settled by detailed mapping. Glaciers told their own story. Old moraines stood 2,700 feet above the Biafo snout on the Lascum Spur and 1,200 feet above the valleys between the K2 Glacier and the Sarpo Laggo. The ice had once pushed far below today's snouts into the Shigar and miles down the Shaksgam past the Confluenza Island, in places almost 3,000 feet thick. More recent thinning near the snouts amounted to about 150 feet on the Biafo, 200 feet on the Sarpo Laggo, and 400 feet on the Crevasse Glacier. Change could also be sudden. The Nobande Sobande, smooth enough in 1929 for a ski traverse, was in 1937 broken into prisms by gaping crevasses, impassable for long stretches. At the Biafo Snout, Spender's 1937 survey set against work from 1933 showed a retreat of about 510 feet in 4 years. That season, there was little, if any, additional summer shrinkage. In 1892, Conway had judged the seasonal retreat to be almost a quarter of a mile. The work ended where it had begun, on the map and on the ground, with rivers still ruling the hours. The chief results were set down plainly: a stratigraphic framework, new fossils, a pattern of intrusions, and the changing measure of the ice.